Kia ora tātou, nau mai harebai ki tēnei huihuinga, te Whakaminenga o Kāpiti. We're going to ask firstly for Hara to start us off with a karakia, please.
Morena kia tātou. Kia takai me te matai tō tātou hui i te atana i roto i te karakia. Nō reira, kia tau mai te mauri tū, kia tau mai te mauri noho, tau mai te mauri roto, tau mai te mauri waho, tau mai te mauri arangi, tau mai te mauri a papa, uhi, wero, hara mai te toki, haumie, huie.
Tai ki. Kia ora. Kia ora, Hara. So next on our agenda, we have apologies. So if we could just note apologies from Mayor Janet, Kirsten Hapatunga Hapotaki Representative and Rawari Tawhai Bodsworth, Chair of Te Atiawa. Can I get a mover for those apologies, please? Martin, kia ora. Do we need a second? And a seconder? Anyone around the table? Anyone online? I can't see me online. I'll second that. We have no requests for speaking time, but just before we move on, I just want to acknowledge those online. So we've got Huruwai Paki online, we've got Denise who's just joined online, we have Sophie, and that's it. So, kia ora tātou. So we've got no one in this public speaking, but we have, moving on to item 4, we have an additional agenda item, and it's been added by Richard. I'm just going to give Richard an opportunity to speak to that if he wishes.
Kia ora tātou. Ngam hi kia koe Kim, thanks for that. The item that I wanted to add to the agenda for today was a kōrero to the Te Harakeke wetlands. Now, these wetlands that I'm going to kōrero about are the ones that just north of the Waikanai settlement, north of the Waikanai Golf Club. Conducted a bit of an assessment of these wetlands myself with a bit of a tour party as well, and also met Paul and Andy. Seem to be extremely passionate and capable people when it comes to. They're very passionate about these wetlands as well, and very knowledgeable. Now, to my knowledge, in 2015, these wetlands were declared that they had outstanding Indigenous biodiversity values. Now, there's only 3% of original wetlands remaining in the Wellington region, so these are a taonga to us, these wetlands. What we're finding now is that the remaining wetlands are being isolated and fragmented, making them especially vulnerable to threats from invasive species, pollution and climate change. And we also noted that these wetlands have had a fair bit of interference over the last 120 years. And from my insight and from also the insight of others in our iwi, we do have some concerns about the current status. So what I'm requesting this morning is that there is a assessment into the current status of these wetlands. They were declared as outstanding 10 years ago. We have question marks around that. They are a taonga to us. Following that assessment, we will also request a review into the management plan of these wetlands. We do, in our opinion, there is a real danger that especially the southern end of the wetlands are drying out, and they will dry out. So they are a native habitat for a lot of species, and they're in danger from, like, as I said, from pollution and climate change in the future. So we want to see something that's put in place that is enduring for the protection of these much treasured wetlands. So we would welcome further kōrero around this and to be at the table with KCDC and I'd imagine Greater Regional Council both councils have a lot of expertise in this area, and between the three of us, we think that we can come to a plan for an enduring solution to make sure that the healthy survival of these much treasured wetlands, as I said, they're endangered, and they are a real taonga and a great feature of Kāpiti Coast. So that's my kōrero, and I welcome next steps following this kōrero from council to ensure that we protect these taonga.
Kia ora. I just want to ask, do you have, is there anyone else who wants to speak on that kaupapa here that you'd like to speak at the table?
I think that's the initial kōrero that we have at the moment around this. But thank you for that, Kim, for that opportunity. I think that's it for now for us.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to ask the staff, in terms of, I'm going to ask Te Tahara and ask what we can do here in council, and what the staff have the capacity to do, if anything.
Morena. Did you say you were working alongside somebody from council? Was it Andy and was that?
That was a site visit, yeah,
Okay.
just to have a look and see for our own eyes that that we do have some concerns around the having an enduring management plan to ensure that these wetlands are protected for our mokopuna and beyond.
Ka pai. And so I'm just confirming, I noted 2 requests in that was the assessment of the wetland and review of the management plan as it currently sits. Those 2 things?
Correct.
Ka pai. So I'm happy to take it from the TWOC table and have a kōrero about it in terms of how we work together. If it's, I'm guessing Te Atiawa ki whakarongotai will endorse someone from your team to work alongside us.
Tika, yeah.
Yep.
Probably my question, if you're finished, Hannah, is do we want to, and probably a question for you, do we want to formally minute that as a motion rather than just leave it hanging in the air?
That would be much appreciated.
Yeah, so can I ask Devon Services to come up with a motion, and we'll look at that at the end of the meeting and we'll pass it then, just so they have time to put some wording around that, and then we can put it on the motion on this table so that it's an actionable thing.
Right. Rawe.
Awesome. Great. Kia ora. So the next thing on our agenda is, this should be an easy one, it's confirmation of minutes. So I'll take them as read, and I have no issue with them, so I will move them and ask for someone to second them. Can I get a seconder from the table, please? Martin, thank you. So where are we? Number 6. Now we're going to head into reports. So I'm going to ask, is Matthew here? Oh, Chris. Chris is here, so if Chris can come to the table, she's going to speak to the co-design of the district environment strategy. Kia ora, Chris.
Kia ora, thank you. I've also got, I've invited Gina to the table today as well. I'll just go back to the paper that I had, sorry. Yes, we are at the table today to talk about the environment strategy. And at a recent strategy operations and finance committee meeting, we had a bit of a discussion around how we wanted to work together and how important the environment strategy is to mana whenua and our iwi partners. And so today, we're actually coming to the table to talk to you about co-design and what that means for us working forward together and what that looks like. So the paper before you provided a bit of background because the Strategy Operations and Finance Committee, after some work that had been done, proposed that we might use existing information we had rather than starting from scratch, just acknowledging that a lot of effort and work has gone into the space through a variety of different means. And if we started with what do we have and thought about how do we take that forward, would that be kind of a first starting point with the acknowledgement that we were trying to get I'm going to call it the first cut of the environment strategy to the table by September. So really what we wanted to talk about today is council's able to say, here's all the things we have, and there are some values in those things, but it may be that iwi and mana whenua have other things that they think are important to actually frame and shape the environment strategy, or you might have other ideas that you want to put on the table. So today for us was a bit more of an open discussion about how do we take it forward. September has been the date that's been put on the table to have a draft strategy. Given the conversation we're having today, is that doable? Or what do we think about that? Acknowledging that it's the start of a conversation, and it may be that more time's needed to think about it or to come back to the table. So any of those things are fine, but I think it's more today we genuinely want to have a conversation about what are our next steps and what do we do.
Kia ora. So before I go around, I'm actually going to go and ask our iwi reps one by one. But before I do this, I just want to say that this is quite timely because at our recent board hui, with my hapu hat on, at a recent board hui, this is the kind of stuff that our board was interested in like in particular environmental. So I think it's very timely. And I know it's been coming. So happy to see this at the table. But before I do, I'm going to start online. By Denise, I'm just wondering if you yes. Do you have any questions?
Kia ora, tēnā tātou, tēnā koe Chris ko. Look, aroha mai, kei takutari au e noho ana, ahua hoi hoi. What am I saying? I'm at my office at Tuanua Road and things are rather hoi hoi here. So I'm just, it's difficult to hear you, Chris, actually. But knowing that we've got a board meeting coming up this evening, it'd be timely, I think, Chris, to be able to share that tonight and get the board's perspective of it and reiterate what Kim's just shared with you to Ngā Hapu board meeting tonight, if that's okay.
Perfect.
Huruwai, do you have any comments or questions?
Oh, no comments from me, thank you.
And Richard?
No comments. We have our board hui next week, so any information around this would be good to share there.
Great, and we have some councillors at the table. Just going to invite them to speak if they have any questions or comments they'd like to make in terms of this. Martin.
Look, through you, Madam Chair, we've actually got our own process around this. It's already come to us. We've already been starting to workshop that as well. So for this particular discussion, happy for, I think what KCDC is looking for is how our iwi partners want to tie into this and receive back from them as such. So no comment from my end as such, other than obviously appreciating any working with council in this space.
Yes, and this is obviously a topic that we are definitely interested in, and so it's good to see us lining that up together. But yes, so we'll take this as we'll have a discussion offline about the just the information. But if I can just point you to the Te Haringa Whakamua document, which is in here. So historically, this document was written, I won't say as our iwi management plan. I'll ask kind of, for that clarification.
It is quite old, but I've just asked him to note whether when we go back to our respective iwi and boards, whether we could determine if that document is still relevant, if I can provide some copies. It was, it did serve at the time, I think it was 2021, maybe earlier.
I think it's
Earlier 2012.
I think it's 2012.
Yeah, sorry, my apologies. Whether or not, and it was mandated from the iwi and Caleb Royal Pātaka Mōma engaged with the three iwi across a range of kaupapa from a tikanga perspective in terms of environment management plan. So we haven't had any advice from iwi that document is no longer relevant. So it'd be good to kind of talk to that as well.
Yeah, so because you'll note that there's quite a few strategies in the paper, and I'm looking at two in particular: the Kaitiaki Plan, Aotearoa ki Whakarongotai, and Te Haringa Whakamua, which covered art. So those, it would be, I know from our perspective, it would be really good to look at those, dive down and look at what that looks like, and potentially, if a review of that is required, and that's something we need to go back on. But in terms of all the other strategies, the idea is that whatever that Te Haringa Whakamua looks like, or the Kaitiaki Plan, that's taken in consideration when we're writing all the strategies, and I believe that was done.
Yes, and as we move forward, we would be double checking that, but we're really looking for that guidance, because if that feels like that is the source of the truth and it's still active, then that is what we would do, and we would obviously work with in whatever way makes sense to bring that to life. I just have one other question relating to that. Was it in updating that, it would also be valuable for us to understand the extent to which things like any new iwi environmental management plans that might be starting to be developed might feed into either the update of 6.1.7, or as well as there might be some things that might be a consideration. So we do know that's happening, but it's in a state of development. So it's just understanding the degree to which those things would come into this, or it might be that it's at a later date that we pick some of those up.
And so that's what I was going to just say there, is that we need to understand what we are looking to get out of each of these processes, because there's a couple of processes within a process. Some might take longer, like if we were to sit and say we want a review of Te Haringa Whakamua, that might take longer, but that might not be what we need in terms of this environmental strategy. So once we unpackage that, then we can actually start to identify what we need to occur and when, so that we're not reinventing the wheel, like you said at the start.
Perfect.
So if everyone's happy with that, basically what we're saying is we're going to take this information back, get a steer on it, and come back with some kind of work plan where we can get the information that we need, but also be future focused and be looking at what our future needs are going to be.
Just to support you, because I heard that there may be through board meetings or upcoming discussions, Appendix 1 actually has a link to the documents.
Great.
So if you're wanting to look at each of them or any of them, you just click in there and it'll take you to the latest version of it.
Great.
I note those links aren't working on mine, but just to note.
We'll send it out so that you can have it. Sorry.
Can I, through you, Madam Chair, can I just add some comments?
Yes.
So I would suggest that for members of for our iwi partners, it's really important. We've got some timeframes that we're looking at around the strategy, but we acknowledge that for our iwi partners, the environment and this work is an incredibly important part of your work and what you want to see happening. So I'm conscious that we don't want to forge ahead as council without having room for our iwi partners to really inform the work that we're doing around the strategy, because we don't want to end up with a piece of work that is unrelated to or is disconnected from our iwi partners in terms of what you're thinking. So as soon as we can get some feedback from you would be really helpful for us, because we'll need to maybe have to adjust our timing to ensure that we can do this well with you, rather than just forging ahead with what we think is a good timeline that works for us. And so I just urge, I know it is important for iwi, and I know you've got a lot of work in that space, but I'm just saying that we've got some time frames and some feedback as quick as possible from your boards around at least some guidance for us, so we can then go, okay, this is what this can look like. That would be really helpful sooner rather than later, if I can place some emphasis in that and underline it. The other bit that I'll just note is this paper references the Whaitua document, which is a Greater Wellington's document that we as council haven't yet adopted as ours. So while it's there for reference, I think it's probably important to highlight that that isn't, in terms of that's not our policy, it's not our piece of work, that is Greater Wellington's piece of work. And yes, there is reference, and yes, we do need to take a look at it, but it hasn't been adopted. I don't think, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, Chris, we haven't adopted it as Kāpiti Coast District Council work or endorsed it yet.
I think I might carefully note that what we've listed under 6.1 was work within this district where we've come together and we have had a lot of valuable input from our iwi partners. And whilst I acknowledge that the Kāpiti Whaitua was tabled, I think it was received by us.
Yes.
We would say the same about Te Katai Kāpiti and the cultural values information in there.
Yes.
I was acknowledging the extensive amount of work that had been put into that by our iwi partners, and acknowledging that it may be that they agree that those are things that they want to bring to this or not. So that was more have a look down these. Are they relevant? Are they things you want us to lean into or not? But you are right, Deputy Mayor, that they're not all ours. Yeah.
So probably just important, I'm not saying Whaitua is not a great piece of work, I'm just saying that it's not formally one of ours, so I just need to be highlighting that. Otherwise, I think that's my comments. I'm really keen, and I think, speaking on behalf of the Mayor, we're really keen to make this a really clear partnership with our iwi partners in this space in particular, because it is a massive piece of work, to make sure we land it well and we can all buy into where we're going in the future in terms of our strategy.
Kia ora. Yes, so just to comment on that and noting that, and thank you for that, Lawrence, is that's exactly kind of my thinking in terms of understanding those timelines and all the varying timelines, because the taiao space for us is an ongoing. It doesn't stop. It's always on our minds. But all these plans listed here, you can see that some of these plans have had, like the Whaitua, Takatai, have had extensive iwi input into them. So if we're following along those lines, then anything along those lines should align. And there's a couple of processes here. There's one to just double check that these things are in alignment, which is probably, I would think, a very quick discussion. But then there's us thinking forward, what do we want, because these documents, Te Haerenga Whakamu is quite old, what do we want that to look like to inform any other strategies coming out of this? So there's another piece of work that we can do to support that environmental strategy. The strategy is the strategy and it sits up there, but actually to inform that and to implement that, we need to start looking at these documents and working on these documents together. And that is a separate piece of work as I see it. I just want to check that with our iwi partners. Are we okay with that? What we're saying is we're going to take some of this information back, figure out what parts in that we need to do to bring back to this table, and what parts are medium to long term that we need to look at going forward. Does that sound reasonable to everybody? Auntie Denise, Huriwai?
Yeah, kia ora, Kim. I tautoko ai o kōrero. I think it's it's an ongoing matter on the agenda, and it gets more important as time goes on. So if council would give us that time to undertake that work and engagement with our people, that would be appreciated.
Huriwai, you're fine with that? He might be busy. Richard, how does that sound to you?
As Denise was saying, engagement with our people is obviously key for this. So tautoko that we have the opportunity to engage with our people and be involved in in this to make sure that our people have a voice. And then, tautoko.
Great. I'm just checking the recommendations. There's no recommendations around that report. Oh, there we go. There we go. Just trying to find them. So the recommendations are that we note the scope and the development approach agreed by the Strategy, Operations and Finance Committee on the 15th of May with an aim of finalising the environmental strategy in September 25 at this stage. Provide feedback and direction on a preferred approach for co-design of the draft strategy, including potential priorities for inclusion and the relevance of existing documentation or material for inclusion, which is probably what we brought to this table and what we plan to discuss outside of this forum. So if I can get a... Lawrence, you have a
Madam
question?
Chair, do we need to add something in related to what has been just quite clearly enunciated, I think, by our partners in regards to giving them time to consult with their people?
In my mind, that's covered under provide feedback and direction on a
Okay.
preferred approach.
Great.
But if anyone else has any other comments or they would like that articulated in another recommendation,
I don't want to create recommendations for recommendation's sake, but
I'm
Capturing-
comfortable
yeah, okay,
that
great.
recommendation B covers us going back, because what we're going to come back to you is what that preferred approach is, and we're going to work together to figure that out. Yes. Is that everybody's understanding around the table? Great. Any other comments? I see no comments online. So if we can have a mover for those two recommendations. Martin, moving. Can we have a second? I can second that, I've just been told. So I'm going to be seconding that. All agree? I have a nod from Auntie Denise, thank you. It's a bit of feedback required here. Koto? Yeah, be vocal. Thanks, guys. So the next report we have on the agenda is an update of the Māori Economic Development Fund. So I'm going to invite Carly to the table, and Carly and Hara will present this report. Yeah, you got it.
I'll just open you up, eh? Yeah. Morena anō kia tātou. So we'll take the paper as read, and Carly will just run through a few of the details. There's a couple of issues that have popped up out of this most recent grant application process. So Carly will talk us through that. Ngā mihi, kia ora Carly.
Morena tātou. This paper reflects the most recent Māori Economic Development grant round, and it also looks to future rounds. So the Māori Economic Development Subcommittee met on the 5th of June to determine the 2025 recipients. 6 applicants were successful. At this hui, there was a lot of kōrero around how the Māori Economic Development grant round may be refreshed and improved for future rounds. Mainly around making it fit for purpose. It was quite clear that there were 2 distinctive types of applications that came through, one being established businesses and startups. And yeah, we'd just like to carry on this conversation and bring it to the Te Whakaminenga o Kāpiti table and look for a way forward. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Carly. Hara, you wanna...
Yeah, I just want to acknowledge Carly's mahi throughout this process. It's been the most subscribed year we've had. Is that right? We've had a lot of applicants this funding round, so ngā mihi nui ki a koe, Carly. Thank you.
Kia ora, tautoko there, Carly. You made the process very simple, but it was a bit larger this year. So, full disclosure, I'm the chair of that committee. Martin is on it with me. And we have John Barrett, Russell Spratz, Waipuna Grace, and that's all we have, wasn't it? Yeah, so they're all the committee members. And what we saw, what we've actually seen over the years that we've been on this committee is that this grant or this process has actually gotten better and better and better over time. But what happens when a process, and our Māori community and our Māori businesses are actually engaging a lot more than they used to. But obviously what happens when things get better is more people want to join the club. And so that's what we're seeing. And now we're seeing a distinct, where before we probably had kind of the same level of applicants coming in, now we're seeing a distinct difference between larger businesses who are actively engaged in the economic development area and in the tourism area, actually seeing value in this process. But we've also got a lot of startups, because traditionally a lot of our Māori business are at-home businesses, and they're small in nature, and they collaborate between themselves. So they use each other to help their business network, and so they don't always have big established businesses. So this is the first year that we've seen that, and we were stuck in a place where we had some champion smaller businesses, but some brilliant larger business ideas, and we had to choose between the two, which is not good, but it needs to be done, and so that's the process that was set out, so we went about to do that. But going forward, we just see the value in not only providing two funds eventually, and what that looks like to be allow for the smaller and the larger, but also sitting around business advice, and I'll ask Martin to talk to this too. It's about teaching people the business of business. It's about that advisory support. And it's not about the council leading that. It's about being collaborative and building relationships with people who are already existing doing that. So that was the discussion that led to this, and it talked about talking about understanding financials and financial implications, and just little things like that some smaller business don't really have the capacity to look into, and providing that support. So those were the main things that came up. And I'll ask, before I go to our iwi partners, I'll ask Martin, because he was on the committee, see if I've missed anything there.
No, I think, Kim, you covered things quite nicely. Having been involved in this one now for about 3 or 4 years, it's good to see the progression. I dare say that's on the back of the economic development strategy being landed, and having the iwi team in space there as well. It all sort of starts bringing different things together, if you like. We did flag, Chris. Just that the Māori economic development strategy might need an update with regards to things, or it might need to be incorporated somehow into our economic development strategy. There needs to be that linkage there, in my opinion. But we did discuss that as well. There's also the startup ecosystem as well, which council's looking to put a bit more structure around, shall we say? And I think that'll be very important to ensure that we have that relation there with our Māori startup as well. I appreciate the business group up in Otaki, and I note that there's engagement happening with them now as well, which has been something that hasn't necessarily been happening very well in the past. So a lot of things coming together, I think, in a very positive way, but need to keep that momentum going. Carly, it was great having you there with regards to getting that structure in place. But I think it's important that we update the Māori economic development strategy, or there's a place for it to sit within the economic development strategy, or it sits on its own. I don't know, but it'd be quite good to sort of have that discussion. I'd like to flag, but it'd be good to have that discussion sometime soon, just to see where it all fits in to the overall plan. Otherwise, to talk about exactly what you're talking about, Kim, it's obviously getting a bit more interest. Interestingly, we see a lot of the same play. We've seen a lot of the same players, but they've come up with some really interesting ideas and concepts, and they've been concepts that have been not just for their business. They've been concepts that have allowed the wider community to participate. And I look at things like recording studios and things like that tied in with Māori lands and hori up there as well. But great to be able to support the kaupapa and being completely honest, a lot of their business is based up in the Otaki area, and that's absolutely fine. But I do know that there are Māori businesses spread throughout the district. But it's good to see, even though it's been there's been some that we've supported a lot over the last 3 or 4 years. We think it's brought a lot to the area, to the business community, and opportunities in the area as well. So I think, although it's not a large fund, it's been a very useful fund with regards to allowing some quite iconic businesses up in Otaki to flourish. And it's good that we've been able to do our part in helping support that kaupapa as it moves forward. But we shouldn't rest, and that's where I'd be quite interested to see how, or have a conversation around how it ties into the economic development strategy in general. The only other thing I would comment on is I note the recommendation talks to EDKB coming and having a chat to Te Whakaminenga. I'd maybe suggest that maybe them coming to a meeting, it might be a workshop type scenario, could be a more interactive approach as such, rather than it being a sort of a bit of a report back type scenario. So that could be something that could be tacked on to the end of a Te Whakaminenga meeting or something like that as well, for convenience sake. But just wanted to flag that as well. Thank you.
And I believe Chris has a response.
Thank you. And I'll start by saying that the chair, with the many hats that she wears, did note and acknowledge that she is on the Economic Development Kotahitanga Board. So we're blessed with that continuity. She did mention Russell Spratt and Wai Puna Grace, who are also on that board. And the Māori Economic Development Strategy is one element of work that is on their work program, and council, so I'll point at my colleague Hara, we are working together internally to support the development of that work as it progresses. Some other blessings we have with the Economic Development Kotahitanga Board is that Hungary Schultz from Burl is also on the board, and she has undertaken some really great research across the country, actually nationally, in terms of Māori business. And she is working in with the Economic Development Kotahitanga Board around that. And I believe that's the approach that, and that work is coming to this table to test and ensure that that feels like a good approach for our iwi partners to really get behind. So in terms of our way forward, action is underway. I think I'd say we're in a planning phase of working out where we think it might go, so that we can come to the table and that be something we do together. So definitely an important thing, definitely the right people here. And I will say, as we get going, absolutely, I think at the right time we'll be bringing it to either briefings or other committees to make sure that there's visibility, opportunity for input, and a collective understanding of what we're hearing and where we think that's going.
Kia ora. Lawrence, you had a question.
Yeah, mine's a question around, I note in the paper that there's a couple of comments around the terms of reference for this subcommittee. And just, I guess, a question, do we have a plan around a review of the terms of reference, or is that linked to the strategy itself? Because I think what I can read between the lines of the subcommittee is they want a bit more clarity in their terms of reference so they can make some decisions around the future of that fund, identifying, as you've already said, the two distinct types of applications and maybe what that could look like in the future. Is there a plan around that?
I'll ask Carly. I can answer that unless you've got something you want to add. Okay. Yeah, so we were just talking about that. So, yes, the terms of reference, it's around, because it's been in situ for quite some time, and so has the the Māori Economic Development Strategy, if anyone has read that.
12
for
years.
a giggle.
And for a giggle.
It's let's just say it hasn't been reviewed for quite some time. But what we're doing through the Economic Development Board is obviously recognised that and decided, okay, we need to do some work on this. And that's exactly the same sentiment that is coming from this group. So obviously the two sitting independently is not ideal. Somewhere along the line, those two things need to be aligned. And in part of that is the terms of reference for this group. So whether or not that drops out of the strategy, whether or not that's something that we need to look at on itself, what I might do is I'm thinking that we should probably get some more information. And I'm noting number 14 on page 15 under issues, and it's about the number of times any one applicant can apply so that we're not continuing to fund the same people over and over again, and we're spreading the fund wider. Now, as a decision at this table right now today, that would be not a decision we could make because we don't have enough information on that. So parts of these we could actually pick apart and actually just get some more information on specific things in these issues, and that would be one of them because it's come up more than once. We've asked the question more than once as a committee. What are our obligations here? What is there a rule around this? So that might need to be addressed sooner rather than later. However, as we're thinking about these things as a strategy, we need to fold that all into it. So we need to be working with the economic development team, and they were all on this committee. But we also need to be bringing in our iwi partners and some of our Māori business people to see actually what works best. And what drops out of that, we don't know until we've had those discussions. But I might actually just flag point 14 as something that we can look at what that process might look like to actually revisit the terms of reference, mindful of the other work going on around, because I think that one is quite an important one and it comes up every year. So if we could have, I don't think we need to move a motion, but Hara?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but am I hearing you want a paper with recommendations in terms of how to progress that point 14, if that's what you...
Aye,
Okay.
yes, that's what you're hearing. Do we need to put a motion around that, or are we okay to take that as an action point?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. So I'm mindful that we've had a discussion. I haven't gone back to our EU partners online, so I'm first going to ask Auntie Denise, do you have any comments or questions around all of that that's just been discussed?
Tēnā koe, Chair Kim. No, I don't. I think my understanding as I followed it has primarily been in letters of support, and I picked up the comments made earlier that, quite often, I'm not saying it's a revolving fund, but quite often the applicants are returning applicants on an annual basis, probably for up to 3 or if not more years. So it'd be good to see if there's any consideration for, I guess, a revisit, a review of the current processes and structure for the board. That it could be timely, I think. But in saying that it's really rewarding to see some of our very smaller businesses in Ōtautahi, not so much the larger ones that are entering in the commercial field, but certainly those that are just the single person out there, and a lot of them make great contributions to our community, especially Te Taha Hauora. So yeah, thank you for the opportunities I've been given.
Kia ora. Huriwai, do you have any comments or questions?
No comments on me. Just support where things are going. Looking good.
Kia ora. Richard, do you have any?
Yeah, I'd just like to mihi to Carly for your mahi, and also mihi koutou. There's a lot of work going on in this space, and it's very encouraging from us as iwi to get the feedback from our people, from our pānui around this. And it's not surprising that there's a record number of applications because there's a lot of interest in this space, and a lot of times it just there's some kōrero earlier on about supports around Māori business, and a lot of times it just needs somebody to back somebody and give them a bit of belief and also some support. So that's really important. That sometimes is a great idea, and people might not have the courage or the or some expertise on how to manage the actual funding and the running of a business. On the other side, there's also times when that seed for an idea isn't quite right and needs more development. But we're hearing back some really encouraging people that have come back to us from our pānui. So I really support, further analysis into how we can support Māori business, not in just terms of funding, but also what other support we can provide for those to launch. And as we know, a lot of businesses, they don't succeed the first or second time round, and then, with the belief and support, people can succeed. So we need to keep backing our people. That's sort of my comment. But really, tautoko all the mahi that goes in behind this, it's really encouraging for our people.
Kia ora. I'm not seeing any other questions around the table. But just to add to what Richard's just said, so what you don't see when you fund a Māori organisation is you don't see the broader outcomes that Māori organisation achieves. So you see what comes through the fund and you see the business being progressed, but you don't see the additional training, the tōkana taina, all the other interrelationships that it benefits from that one little fund. So that's probably one of the things that I've noticed over time in terms of Māori businesses and what they do. And they've always got that element in them, everything they do, which is great. Lawrence?
So just following up on that, is there some way that we can capture that story better? Because that's talking to reporting on outcomes, the broader outcomes, rather than direct outputs as a result of the funding. And that probably fits a bit with some of the work that Council's doing in terms of saying we want to look at broader outcomes, not just the outputs, particularly in our work across the social sector, social and community sector. I would suggest that's probably similar also in this space for economic development in Te Ao Māori. Because it's more than just the bottom line numbers of a business, it's the.
Yeah, and that's something that we have not done in the past, and whether or not that's something that we actually build into the process.
So I would endorse that and just say I think we need to tell the story better in that space, because anytime we give money to businesses, some people in our community go, "Why are we doing that?" Businesses should run and stand on their own 2 feet. And so it's really important that we are telling the bigger story of the community benefit and the benefit to the people, not just directly connected with that business, but in the broader one. So just maybe a question that probably something for us to discuss how we do that.
Yeah, and I'm just mindful that more reporting requires capacity. So not to add to workloads of people struggling to do their business at the start. And also, how does that work with council? But I do think that that's one of the key things that I get out of seeing when I'm looking at, and not just Māori business, other business as well, but it's that underlying reach that they're having and the impact that they're having in their community. So that'd be something that we can work through all these pieces of work, through the strategy, the terms of reference, the process. And Hara's she's noted down here that she's going to bring that back and give us some options around that. Because we need to understand fully what that means and what that looks like when we give these motions and what that actually looks like on the ground for people to deliver on that. But good point. And on that, I don't see any other questions. I've got Cam, who wants to comment.
Tēnā koe, Kim. Just a quick pātai. In regards to 14, would that list have changed, in terms of the recipients, would that list have changed if there was like a 1 year or a 2 year requirement between applications? Like, are there ones there that you would have potentially said, no, we'll give it to someone else in that situation if there was a requirement for you can't apply every year?
The difficulty is, straight answer, yes, it would have, but the difficulty is that they're different projects. So they're different functions, and because there's nothing in the terms of reference around how we determine what that looks like, we have no point to go back to say, okay, we need to assess it based on this, 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 and this.
Yeah.
So it makes that conversation difficult because some of these are at completely different focus projects, even though they're with the same entity.
Yeah. 'Cause
So this is why the question's being asked, because it puts the committee at risk if they don't have something to measure that against.
yeah. But then I guess you'd probably potentially want it as a guideline rather than a strict line in the sand, because there could be a fantastic project that comes up from a company or a business in that same 12 months.
Yes.
And you don't want to be obligated to say, Carl, we can't do that.
Yeah,
So,
and that's what we have been, we've just been assessing them on their merit when they come in. But just knowing that if we get people that are continually applying, where does the stop go? What do we need to consider when we're considering them? Not a hard and fast, but what are the things that we need to be considering for this fund to be reflective of all of Kāpiti?
yeah, I was just coming from a community board point of view where we have some great projects, but we say, no, sorry, you've applied within 12 months, we can't give you the money, and you're like, actually, this is a great project.
Yeah.
So it would be, yeah.
What I'm hearing is it'd be good to have some flexibility.
No,
We'll just note that when we discuss it. If there's no other questions on that paper, and I'm not seeing...
I just had one other
Oh,
comment, if I may, very, very, very quickly. One of the things I regularly ask the applicants when they come back to me, and some of them, like I said earlier, are returning applicants, I often ask them how their business is growing. Two, I ask how many customers they've generated in the last 12 months, and I ask how wide and how far their service or product is actually being used and shared amongst our Otaki people. So they often they'll write an extra note in their application to me, normally providing that. So that just gives me an insight if I'm not necessarily over all the little businesses we might have. Lets me know that what they're doing is being shared with newer members or new customers or users on an annual basis. So, just wanted to share that, Lawrence.
Thanks, Auntie. And I just want to add to that because
Kia ora, Auntie.
there was also a discussion. Sorry, Lance. There was also a discussion about because each applicant has to get a letter of recommendation from their prospective iwi in which they are, their businesses located in. And we did talk about also about giving guidance to our iwi in terms of having them involved, not so much involved in the process, but giving them some guidelines of what we're looking for so that they, like Auntie Denise has done this for quite some time, so she has their list of questions, but some of us don't. So helping iwi with that as well in terms of when they're putting that recommendation on the table. So yeah, and whether that's in the scope of this paper, I'm not sure, but those are just the conversations that have been had, so just noting what she said there. Is there our last round? I'll ask if there's any other questions. Nothing else? Well, if there's no other questions, we do have some recommendations. So recommendation A, which I think we've done, acknowledge and thank the members of the subcommittee for making themselves available to assess and allocate funds. And recommendation B, invite the Economic Development Kotahitanga Board members to a Te Whakaminenga or Kāpiti meeting to discuss the review of the strategy for Māori economic development and wellbeing in Kāpiti. In terms of your comment, Martin, are you asking that we put a motion on the table? Because I'm looking at recommendation B, and meeting to discuss could mean workshop or paper, or would you like it articulated?
Through you, Madam Chair, I've voiced it. I'm quite happy that this will be taken away and the pathway brought forward.
Great.
I don't think it needs to have that much definition.
Great.
As such, and yep, for me, it's just making sure it's progressing.
Yes, yes, I think we all can agree on that.
Do we look? Maybe if we have our register of kaupapa that we're we're keeping an eye on. This could be perhaps dropped in there as well.
Great, so you've got that noted. Okay, so can I get a mover for both those recommendations, please?
Happy to move.
Lawrence, move Lawrence. Can I second that? And I will second that. Everyone agree? Online, I have to put a hand up. Looks like we all agree. Great, so that's passed. Thank you very much, Carly, and for all your work. Will there be letters sent to the subcommittee? Is that normally happens there?
Letters sent to the subcommittee.
Sorry, I'm just going to ask a question, just what Lawrence said, in terms of the thanks to the
Thanks
subcommittee.
to the subcommittee.
Yeah,
We can do that.
yes, thank you. And now we have 6.3, which is the partnership agreement, and that's going to be presented by Orewia and Hara. Orewia, no mai hara mai.
I thought Orewi was at another hui. You made it back just in time. Yeah. Yeah, Orewi is, we've just put it on the agenda today for an update around the final version of the partnership agreement and the signing event. So I might just hand it over to you and just go through the final version and who you've sent it to, and then I'll pick up the signing event.
Yep.
Ka pai? Kia ora.
Tēnā tātou. So I would have emailed out the final version in its content form, I think last week Friday.
Yep.
For review. That we've brought that to Te Whakaminenga o Kāpiti today for endorsement. The design and the Te Reo Māori version is still underway. We're expecting the final design version to be completed by next week, ready for the signing event on Friday next week. Ka pai?
So just noting also that it is on the agenda for Thursday's council hui for endorsement, and we are working alongside Raukawa Marae for the signing event next Friday. Details or invites have already been sent, so the team are working through the logistics of that alongside our whānau at Raukawa Marae.
Yeah, so this has been on our table. We've had quite a few workshops over it. Probably the only thing I want to say is that through those workshops, there's always been a difference between, well, I won't say misunderstanding, but a difference of what this document actually is. So this document is actually the partnership agreement. What it's not is the terms of reference, which means it's not our representation, it's not how the mechanics of this partnership plays out in council and in council committees. It's the partnership agreement. It's the agreement where we sit there and we say, these are the things we agree on, these are the tikanga that we agree on, this is how we agree to engage with each other and how we agree to treat each other when we're at this table. As to the terms of reference, which describes the detail of how that works, that's a paper yet to come. But before we can do that, before we can enter into any discussion of what we're going to do together, we need to actually just formally decide what are our limits, how are we going to work with each other, how we're going to respect each other's te noranga teratanga. So that's what this partnership agreement is. So on there, I'll just go to our iwi partners and I'll go to Auntie Denise online first. To provide any feedback around the partnership agreement itself. Kia ora, Auntie.
Kia ora tātou. And be honest, we haven't had what I would call a deep dive in any document that we would be undertaking an arrangement with in terms of ngā hapū o Taki. We have had our board members request that we table that tonight's meeting to discuss. and that's probably what I need to convey today. And I just want to thank Kim for that clarification. That's really helpful, Kim, I think, going forward with discussions. But I think I've had a good read of it. I read the draft, a few changes, Oribia, since the first draft came out. So thank you for the document which we received last Friday. So we will be discussing it tonight. I just heard we've got a council meeting on Thursday, so we'll try and have a decision back to the table, I guess, through the iwi partnership team by tomorrow.
Kia ora. Huriwai,
Kia ora.
is there any feedback from Tour's end?
Not yet. I will chase up with relevant parties on that one and similar try and get some feedback and decisions through ASAP.
Kia ora. Richard, any thoughts?
Yeah, the previous Te Whakaminenga hui, our Tumuaki Rawiri mentioned that we request for our kaumātua engagement and feedback. So that has been presented to you guys the end of last week, and Hara's acknowledged that. So there's basically the overall feedback was very positive. There was just a couple of small requirements which will be easily managed for us for our feedback to our kaumātua. But yeah, that was the only comments that we had to add to what Rawiri mentioned the previous hui. So kia ora for that.
Kia ora, Richard, thanks for that. And I'm going to ask our councillors at the table who have been at these discussions with us in terms of their thinking around this partnership agreement, if they have any comments as well. Lawrence?
Thank you. Thank you, Kim. It's exciting to be able to land this and celebrate the 30 years from my perspective. Having said that, I'd really like confirmation from our iwi partners before we're voting on this on Thursday, because for us as council to approve this without a clear sense that we do have our iwi partners fully on board with it, I think would be unwise of us to do that. And so I guess that's a bit of a challenge that sits around this table, I guess, for the Art Confederation to ensure that we do get that before. I would stand probably, and the Mayor would back me with this. I haven't spoken specifically to her about it, but we would find very uncomfortable to approve it if there wasn't a sense that our iwi partners were also on board with that. So just wanted to highlight that from our perspective. But yeah, very excited. Hopefully we can get it through to a point where next Friday we can have a bit of a really significant occasion as we sign this again. 30 years is a fantastic milestone, and to be able to refresh it and to be able to look forward to the next generations that are involved with this agreement as we move forward is something to be, it's a momentous occasion, I think. So, thank you.
Martin?
Yeah, look, I would agree with that. I'm actually going to pull a bit of a harder line than the Deputy Mayor. We are having a council meeting on Thursday to sign this off, and that's the only reason we're having a council meeting on Thursday, to sign this off. So I know that I would certainly be uncomfortable doing that without having acknowledgement of our iwi partners, that they are in full agreement with regards to what's been written here. And if we don't have that on Thursday, that would be awkward, to say the least, because there has been lead-in time to all this. This has been going on for a while. So I hate for that to be a negative, because I think what we're doing here is absolutely fantastic. And I'm sure it's on track. I'm sure it's on track. You know, it's, you know, and this was just reiterating it as such, because we do want to get it signed. And look, I commented at the last meeting how, in my personal opinion, that we're I'm not going to say turning a corner here, but I think, you know, the pathway we're on at the moment is a very good, positive one, and I think that's reflected today even by the korero that was bought to the table today by Richard, which I know came in via some other pathways as well. To me, this is the sort of stuff that we want to hear coming to the table so that it can be captured, addressed as such as well, and this is the right forum for those sorts of things. But it's one of those dot I's, cross T's things that we want to get closed off. So looking very much forward to next week, as Lawrence pointed out, the actual our partnership signing, re-signing as such. I think it'll be a very humbling event as such. A 30-year relationship, and when I'm around the country, this does get referred to, this relationship as such. I think we're very fortunate, but these things don't happen by magic either as well. It usually takes the not usually, it takes the willingness of all parties concerned to act in a mana enhancing way for the benefit of our wider communities as such. So this puts, we're talking frameworks today, this puts that framework in place, but quite frankly, frameworks don't really matter so much. It's more about the actual personal relationships that you have. This is a relational committee, so those relationships are important. I think we have strong relationships at the moment, and long may they continue.
Well, kia ora kōrua. I just want to acknowledge your sentiments around not passing this without iwi sign-off, because there was a time around this table where that would not have happened. So from that alone, we could see the progress that we have made. So I'm happy to commit to getting something back, a confirmation in writing, and I think this is just a discussion. It's more making sure that we've got everyone on board rather than there being any issues. Because most of us have been around this table, but we do need to be mindful that we act here for some other people. So we need to go through that process. But I'm happy to commit to, and even if we want to, I'm going to take advice here whether we put a motion that we have confirmation in writing from the TWOP chair, myself, by tomorrow, so that you can be comfortable going into that council hui, that this is the direction that we want to go in. And that's for your safety as well as ours, as well as those that sit around this table.
I would suggest there's no need for a motion on that. I'll take you at your word on that, Kim.
Yeah.
Also, I just want to acknowledge the amount of hard work that goes on behind the scenes with our iwi partners. I note that both Councillor Halliday and myself have emphasised the importance of getting agreement, but I just want to acknowledge that there's a lot of work for iwi to be able to come to a point to feel confident to be able to endorse it. And so I guess that's the tension that I just want to acknowledge in this space. Yeah, and I'll leave it at that.
Kia ora. And just to a point that you made too, Martin, about not wanting to draw a timeline on it, but having to. Once upon a time, that might have been taken as something you're imposing timelines on us. But because we're going through this journey together, these kind of things, we can deal with them now because we know where they're coming from, and that speaks to that relationship that you speak about. So for me, sitting around this table, I have seen progress in that. And then this is just the first start to that. And then what drops out of this, obviously, is how we do that on the ground. So yeah, so that's all the comments I have. Unless there's any other comments around the table. We have no recommendation, so we don't need to pass a recommendation. Nothing else? Okay. Kia ora. Thank you, Olivia.
Yeah, thank you, Olivia.
Next on our agenda, we get to the moment where we have updates from around the table. So as a chair, I'm going to pass over our updates to Auntie Denise, if she has any to share.
Kia ora tātou. Where should we start? Probably just to say that we're still working through with ngā hapu with our...
I think something's happened with your mic.
So,
Yep, there you go.
just that, yeah, with our new board members. So, in terms of where we are, I think there's good interest in the coming elections, especially with the Māori ward representative and how ngā hapu and our Otaki community is going to approach them. And also mindful of the time constraints ahead of us to be coming back to council with any recommendations, or even being able to confirm who might be keen to stand in our community, and then further on into the local body elections following after. So yeah, interesting things. I think probably to say that keeping up with the Crown and the range of hearings that are occurring in our environment and in our daily lives on a daily basis is certainly taking its toll on people, and it's numerous, it's constant, and it requires substantial work, research before you're ready to sit at the table, to the point perhaps that we may not have been able to participate in as many as we would have liked. Kia ora, Kim.
Kia ora, and I'll turn to Huriwai. Any updates at your end, Huriwai?
I'm just trying to scratch my head on that one. No, it's been sort of nothing specific to raise, really.
Kia ora. Richard, anything at your end?
Kia ora anō. Yeah, it's just backing up fire Denise was talking about with the elections. We're certainly we've expressed interest in running a wānanga and following on from the one that'll be in Otaki. Very interested in that. Now, a kaupapa which is of great importance. Some of you may have already seen this, that the High Court last week ruled that Atiawa ki Whakarongotai has been awarded marine customary title in our rohe as well. There is some, there's a full press statement that's been released, as well as it is public on our Facebook page as well, that there's around that decision. There are some overlapping interests in that, but that gives Atiawa ki Whakarongotai marine customary title 1 nautical mile out from the high tide mark. So there's a significant moment for our iwi. So I just wanted to acknowledge that, and all of the mahi that's gone in behind that, Tihima Baker and a massive support crew behind him, and what it was an extremely long process to get to this point. So that's probably the most significant announcement and moment we have for our iwi at the moment. So kia ora.
Kia ora, yeah, that's a substantial one, and I believe there was something that came out from Raukuki Te Tonga along the same lines. I'm not sure, so I won't say. But yes, that is substantial. So well done to you and your team. Is there any other updates from councillors that they want to bring to the table?
Nothing really other than what we've already spoken about, and looking forward to the continuing conversation in regards to how we can support the Māori ward process and the referendum. I note that we talked about that last time, and so that continues to be probably something that's pretty important around the council table, is how we can support the decision we made to ratify the ward being established. Then to be able to continue it beyond just this next election is probably our next. We would really like to have that happen. So yeah, working together in terms of what we can within the restrictions that the council has around our being involved in an election, but also wanting to support that really well. So that kōrero, there is a level of urgency to that. I'll just highlight that again. And note that Whaia Denise did say that she's aware of that. So look forward to that.
Kia ora. If there's nothing, Martin?
Oh, look, just commenting, just building a little bit on what Lawrence said. I brought it up for the importance of whoever does stand in the Māori ward space having some space to speak to the Māori community, you know, and would be very appreciative from having been through those processes, as we all are, for our EV to facilitate some of those spaces would be much appreciated. I've said it before, say it again, and I'll sort of say it again at the next meeting as well. So just keeping it there as a reminder.
Kia ora, yes, that's all forefront on everyone's mind, I think, that kaupapa. And if I can move to the next agenda item, it says, I don't believe we have any correspondence, unless I'm wrong. No. So, and number 10 is talks to any future agenda requests. So, if there are any future agenda items that you wish to be on this hui, please email. Should they email you or myself? Yeah, if you could just email myself and CC and Hara so that we can get them on the agenda. I also note that last hui we had some items in publicly excluded, so we are going to move into publicly excluded. I believe we need to get someone to. Can someone move us into public excluded, please?
Look, excuse me, Madam Chair, I just wanted to comment first. You were talking about a motion in regards to the kōrero that Richard brought to the table around the wetlands. Only reason I say that is if we move into public excluded, clearing the gallery, and we've got some members of the public that might be interested in that.
Thank you. We do have something. We do have a motion there. If we can pop that up. It will be on the screen shortly.
Kia ora, Kim. Also, in respect to non-actual Te Waka members, are you happy for the likes of myself to stay for public excluded?
Can I just check that, because I'm not sure around the rules around public excluded. Right, here we have the motion now. Can we make that a bit bigger?
Kia ora, Kim. Just like to acknowledge Whaia May and Jason Thurston for your tautoko today, previous kaupapa. Thank you very much for your tautoko here today. Really important for us.
Just the question, would you like them to speak to the kaupapa as they've come to support you before we look at this?
They're most welcome to if they'd like to.
Kei te pai. So the recommendation is that Te Whakaminenga o Kāpiti recommends to Council that they request staff to begin an investigation into the status of the Kawakahia Te Harakeke wetland and a review of the reserve management plan. Are you happy with that?
Excuse me, Madam Chair. Sorry, but I'm just aware that there's some urgency around this. Part of the conversation I'm hearing, there's been a depletion of the wetlands. That's one of the reasons why this has come to the table. Due respect to process and that sort of stuff, but I know this can be slipped into a work program, but I just wanted to note that there is some urgency involved here with regards to addressing what seems to be a issue with the wetlands, and I would hate to see it progress and become a lot worse as such before we're able to address this. So I just wonder if we can put there's some urgency, somehow word that in there, that there's some urgency around this. Would be appreciated.
Do we have any wording for that? I'm mindful I don't want to put a date.
I'm not saying put a date. No,
Yeah.
I'm not saying put a date.
Yeah.
Just if we could just perhaps note that this has been brought to the table, noting that this has been brought to the table by community with regards to the concern of the deterioration, the recent deterioration.
Can we have that as a separate recommendation? Because it's just has to be
Lawrence,
the
you
noting.
might suggest some process for that.
So some wording around that, noting that this has been brought to the table as an urgent, or that this is a priority.
Deterioration, the recent deterioration of the wetlands. As
a matter of priority, that this has been brought to the table as a matter of priority for Te Atiawa. Te Atiawa ki whakarongotai.
And just correct the word matter in there.
Thank you. I know it's hard to write recommendations when everyone is staring at the screen. Aroha mai. So if we're happy with those, so the first one I've read, second one, notes due to the recent deterioration of the wetlands, that this has been brought to the table as a matter of priority for Te Atiawa ki whakarongotai. Priority 4 instead of priority 2. Matter of priority 4 Te Atiawa ki whakarongotai. Kia ora. So that is the recommendation on the table. Can I have a mover for that recommendation, please? Richard move. Can I have a second? Martin, second. All in favour? Oh, do you have a question? Sorry, Lawrence.
I was just looking at the E-plan on the operative district plan. This wetland isn't classed as a reserve on there. It's currently under Narara Development Area, General Rural Zone. If I'm looking at the right spot, just north of the Waikana Golf Club. So it's not listed on our district plan as a reserve area or an open space. It's a general rural zone. So there's from what I can see, there's no protections existing in our district plan for this wetland.
Maybe that would be something that the team can find out and bring back to the table, so that we can get some information around that.
That just prioritises this even more. If we've got no protection on a wetland, we could lose it pretty quickly.
So I'm still going to keep the recommendations as they are, or are you requesting that they be?
No, I just think we need to note that the district plan currently, just even in our conversation, district plan currently doesn't seem to have any protection for that. There are underlying classification issues.
And I think Chris has not an answer, but a reply to that.
There's an ecological site in there.
Chris, do you have any information there?
Yeah, just a note that there is a Narara Development Area Structure Plan for which this fits within.
Great.
Which you may have linked into Deputy Mayor. So maybe we can identify the right part of council to follow upon that, and it might be that we don't necessarily need to note management plan and a review of existing, perhaps its protections. But leave that with you to consider, because I think that's what you're wanting.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing is, because there might not be a reserve management plan, that wording may become something that hinders us for doing. So it's around reviewing the protections of that site.
And potential future management, and I'll take the reserve out, but management plan might be a better way of putting it.
So review of the protections. Yeah, if we can get some wording.
Sorry, I'll just clarify that. So there is a current management plan, but it's due to the underlying classification issues, it's not actually considered a statutory document under the Reserves Act. So we could take out reserve management plan, or just the reserve bit, because it's
a review of the protections of the wetland. Because my understanding is what we are trying to do is highlight that this wetland needs protecting. And what we are trying to get to is conversation with council to find out how we do that. That is what we're trying to do. We're not trying to bind ourselves by any laws. We're trying to get to that protection of this wetland and collaboration with Te Atiawa around what that looks like. So if I'm reading this recommendation now, recommends to council that they request staff to begin an investigation into the status of Kawakahia Te Harakeke wetland and a review of the protections and the review of its protections. Or are we happy with wetland and management plan? I actually think we should take out the management plan.
Because there is a current management plan going on. You know, in our visit with Paul and Andy, there is management around the culvert. There is management around the effects of the water flow in that area.
So this might take a bit more thought. A review of existing protections. The reason I don't want to take, the reason I want to be flexible in the fact that Richard's mentioned there is a management plan, and there will be a management plan related to this area to ensure that we are reviewing any plans around this area. Or are we comfortable with protections? Very hard to do this on the hot people.
Should we take 5? Should we do 5?
Yeah.
Oh, maybe I'll ring Andy.
Yeah.
Because there's a restoration plan.
Because there are quite a lot of things that sit behind this wording, and when you put in something like management plan, exactly what are you referring to? And what you do is you restrict the ability to discuss the overall outcomes of that. So if our intention is to, 1, work out the protections, and 2, make sure that there's collaboration with iwi, we need to make sure that the wording is flexible enough to allow that to happen across any plans that sit around this wetlands, rather than have us get caught up on management plan, which management plan, and be specific. Do you have any comment on that? I'm just going to ask you. Yeah. And is that in line with what? Cool. Just want to get it right. Yeah, we might get you a mic so everyone online can hear you. Yeah. Just want to make sure the intent of what we're trying to do is captured.
Hello, hear me?
Is that on?
Can you hear me? Just putting all the technicalities and the infrastructure aside, the waterways are the most important, crucial element, and that's what we want to put back in place with our cultural, background, whakapapa, taonga tuku iho, te riti o Waitangi. That's where we are sitting on to bring back the health of those waterways that have been distracted and taken somewhere else, is why we're here. So, I suppose collaboration is the word, but there must be a much more soulful word.
We might just need 5 minutes to think of that word. Thank you. Kia ora. So if we can just take 5, have a cup of tea. For those online, we're just going to take 5 until we can get some wording that reflects what we're trying to achieve around this wetland, and then we'll come back to that. Okay, so we'll adjourn. Not adjourn. Adjourn for 5 minutes. We'll be back in 10 minutes.